Welcome to the Long Range Pursuit Podcast, presented by Gunworks, where we learn about and share long-range shooting techniques, science, and gear.
All right, welcome back to Long Range Pursuit Podcast. We've got another episode of Ask Aaron. Got Aaron in here today, and as always, like to reserve a couple of the more technical topics for the guy that knows all the answers here in the building. So we solicited a few questions here just recently. Put up a post on Instagram and asked for, whatever guys have been wanting to know for a long time. So kind of the big opportunity to ask all your big technical, scary questions. So starting out, one of the big things, we've got this BR4 rangefinder that we launched, I think it was last fall. So It's been out. We're going on a year now. Had really good luck with it. But we get pretty commonly a lot of questions, guys asking, what's the best targeting method I should use? I think there's some new targeting methods in that unit that guys have not seen in other units that they've used in the past. Some new features added into that rangefinder. So I think we'll dive into a couple of these specific questions about the BR4, but I think that's probably one. And maybe even to start, we dive into just a little bit about the background of the story and where that came from.
Sure.
I think a lot of guys have seen it, a lot of guys running that unit, but probably we still got a lot of guys running the old G7 or the BR2, which was a great unit. But as good as that was, this BR4 is light years ahead. The way technology's expanded over the years.
If we just dive into just a real quick short background, like Gunworks has always been a technology focused company. Mm-hmm. If you go out into the industry and you look, there's a lot of great custom gun makers that are out there. I mean, some of them make quite a few guns, but essentially they just assemble components.
Sure.
And they do a great job, and they make rifles that shoot really good, and they're really sexy looking. And it's a great business to be in. We have always had a different mindset. Before we even started Gunworks, we were developing our first patent for ballistic systems and methods, and we developed software systems to mark custom BDC turrets, et cetera, et cetera. So when we launched our systems, shipped the first ones in 2007, by 2011, we launched the Rangefinder, which is an absolutely vital component of a long-range system. So we've always envisioned owning all the different parts, the rifles, the ammunition, the optics, and the laser rangefinder. So for us, the laser rangefinder has always been a key aspect. And when we launched the BR2 in 2011, we had 5 years of uncontested space. We were the first people to put out a rangefinder that had a real-time ballistic solver on board that actually did a calculation and gave you a solution. It was designed to be fairly simple, straightforward, to kind of fit into that BDC turret system to get guys out to 1,000 yards in hunting situations and correct for incline and air density changes.
Yep.
And let you use a BDC turret because they're fast and easy to use. So if you fast forward to where we've developed that electronics and optics business, it kind of spun off and turned into Revic. And so 2017 we launched the Revic PMR, heads-up display scope, all sorts of technology. We did all new algorithms. We did all the electronic circuit design in-house. We've got the whole team that can do the software, the firmware, the hardware. And, we're working with an OEM partner for the optics train. We do all the mechanical design on turrets and systems. Well, this is kind of the first step into kind of like an A-B solution where you have really technologically advanced products where we try to make the first glance or the turn it on and use it out of the box system easy and simple.
Sure.
But if you start digging, there's all sorts of Easter eggs and there's all sorts of capability for the most advanced possible user to experience and use and have success with. And so the follow-on to that is the BR4, and essentially the same thing, where the goal was to try to capture as much of the simplicity of that original BR2 and then address, more and better of all the things that we created that were awesome in that first product.
Yeah.
And have all those little extras for the guys that are power users that they can go in and set up and use and find success even further and further distances.
And I think it's pretty unique because, I mean, literally the guy that buys a rifle from us, if he orders a rangefinder with that rifle, it's going to come programmed. So, I mean, that guy it's almost an out of the box push a button and done kind of solution. Right. Once it's programmed, I mean, there's really almost no thinking needed.
And a lot of customers take advantage of that type of white glove service that we offer.
Right.
But, you talk about some of the cool features that we've got. Yeah. We made this programmable from the app on your phone. And everybody has a smartphone. Everybody opens at least one app a day on their smartphone. We've tried to make our app very simple, but programming from an app allows us to do very complex ballistic profiles very easily in the app. Right. And to validate them and to check them and make sure they're good. And then just with one button stroke, push it over to the rangefinder. So it's a change fundamentally in how we get our data onto the device. But what it does is it lets us have a fairly simple user experience that has very complex and sophisticated
going
features
on in the background, right? And I think that was kind of my point is like you've got this broad spectrum from basic out of the box use for the guy that doesn't want to think about it to the very most advanced power user, right? And anywhere in between. And I think that it can kind of there are different use cases that lend themselves to both.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, I like to use things in simple mode, but I like to have things
have the power, right?
That have the power.
Yeah, for sure. So, I think I'd kind of angle this as a kind of distilling a lot of these questions that have come in is getting the most out of your rangefinder. And this may not just be the BR4, but maybe other rangefinders as well. I think a lot of these ideas translate as well. Talking about, beam divergence maybe is one where, a lot of guys don't understand exactly how beam divergence in a unit affects its performance and how they need to alter or use that, or alter their behavior or use that product in a way that is getting the most out of it.
Beam divergence is in the rangefinder space is exactly like our negative comb on a rifle stock.
Yeah.
It's something that we haven't put a lot of hype and promotion into because frankly, I don't want everybody to copy it.
Yeah.
But regardless of that, everybody's going to copy it because it offers absolutely superior performance. And I think this is probably one of those areas where right now you see a huge contrast between the monocular device and the binocular.
Yeah.
All the binocular guys are using round beam divergence. Most of the cheap rangefinders have round, beam shapes. And only recently have some of the guys started to pick up on what we've been doing since the very beginning. And that is creating a horizontal layout that has a hard bottom edge. When we started, the Terrapin had their cheap 905 laser. They actually made it a vertical rectangle.
Yeah.
And once we go through, I'll share you some tips. There's a couple tips on a rangefinder that are really important. I'm going to share some tips on that to answer that question the long way around. But I think right now, the targeting modes are probably one of the most sophisticated things that a laser rangefinder can offer. And if you do not have a horizontal rectangular beam, then you cannot apply the most necessary targeting modes to get good target discrimination at longer distances.
Right.
And 5 minutes on a ballistic calculator and just try like a solution at 800 yards and then try one at 840 yards and look at how much your point of impact is going to change.
Yeah.
And that tells you if I'm off 40 yards in my range because I didn't quite, pick up the target, I picked up something that was just right behind it.
You're hitting them in the brisket, right?
Yeah. I mean, or miss or whatever. Yeah. Wound or miss. Like hopefully it's a miss because
don't want that. Right?
Yeah. I think in the BR4, the approach that we took was we cut out a few of the modes that I felt like weren't as useful. So we used to have like a strongest target mode. Then we had the far target mode, a near target mode.
Yeah.
And we had a scan function. I think scan function is absolutely worthless. When you start thinking about a ballistic rangefinder that calculates the ballistics, exactly what ballistic solution are you going to try to pick up? And why scan? If you have a good target discrimination characteristic, you don't need scan.
Yeah.
Just pick the target out, apply the techniques that I'm about to share.
Yeah.
Boom, you've got it.
You know, I find myself, and maybe you can tell me this is right or wrong, but I find myself, maybe it's my OCD, hitting a target 2, 3, 4 times, right? Yeah. It's like, okay, if I get one range and I get a different range, I try again, and all of a sudden now I'm getting an average in my brain of, okay, I got 3 hits that were at this range and 2 others that were kind of error.
Yeah, standard techniques is to take your measurement twice.
Yeah.
Right? You go to the machine shop and run a caliper. You don't just grab it once, you take it twice, right? Or 3 times. So you take the measurement a few times. That's one technique that's great. Also, I like to bracket the target.
Yep.
So pick out something that you know is closer and that you know is farther. Sure. Maybe a more vertical surface that's easier to pick up. Mm-hmm. Grab those numbers and say, hey, does this make sense? Does that number that I got a couple times make sense in context of those other 2 targets? Those are super simple. Another really, really easy one is just get the device steady.
Yeah, right.
Right? We've always had an integrated tripod mount. So you got a 1/4-20 mount, so you can do tripod mount or even just getting locked in with your elbows and bracing up and getting steady. But getting steady is huge.
Yeah.
Those 3 things are those are Rangefinding 101. That's stuff that we teach people in our long range training courses. It's straightforward stuff.
Right.
The second one is just using the targeting modes on the device and using the beam divergence to discriminate your targets. That's a little bit more sophisticated. And I just want to describe this because if your rangefinder doesn't do this, or you're not using your rangefinder this way, then you're missing out on the ability to get more confidence in your ranges and have better impacts because of that.
Right.
So imagine a horizontal beam. Ours is, the spec is like a half mil by 1.5 mil.
Yeah.
But it actually measures a little bit smaller than that. We've measured some that are, down around, 0.2, 0.3 mils. So it's not perfectly square. Let's just say that it's like light. A laser's like light. You turn your flashlight on, it creates this cone of light. We're trying to focus ours into this shape.
Sure.
So you get a little bleed out at the ends of your square. But the most important thing for us is that you have a really hard defined bottom edge.
Yeah.
So in the reticle in the rangefinder, we've created a little square, a little rectangle shape that exactly fits the bulk of that laser energy that we're putting out there. And so that bottom edge is what we align off of.
Yeah.
So when you have that arrangement, so now we've got this skinny horizontal beam, so 0.2 milliradian, 1.5 milliradian. We're keeping most of the energy on an elk at 1,000 yards. Yeah. You get further than that, it starts to get bigger. But so if you take that beam, and then we apply the targeting ranges. Basically, what we did right now is we have a nearest target and a farthest target.
Yeah.
So we're just discriminating near and far. Very rarely do I use far. That is like fog, snowstorm, standing dead timber, conditions where you're trying to reach back and get the farthest thing that's reflecting energy. I don't use it very often. The one that I use all the time is nearest. And so I'll set my rangefinder up on nearest mode. I'll take that hard bottom edge on the display, and I'll come down on the target to where, let's say it's an antelope in the rolling sagebrush terrain in Wyoming in mid-August with lots of heat waves, and I don't want to get down into the sagebrush that's kind of in front of him, because that could be 100 yards closer. What I want to do is I want to catch his back, and then if there's any spillover, I want it to go behind him. Mm-hmm. So I'll come down on that animal on nearest mode. I'll get that edge, down halfway down his body, but I'll keep it away from any of the sagebrush or grass that could be in front of him, kind of covering his legs or, between him and I. All right, so when I do that, and I am on nearest mode, now I take that range, it's going to give me that target. Yeah. And I've just by the way that I'm aiming, I've eliminated all the stuff in front of him. And then I'm using the algorithms in the device to eliminate all the stuff behind him.
Sure.
So that right there is the most significant technique and methodology for obtaining ranges that are 1 yard precise, and give you that 100% confidence that when you do a ballistic solution, you're not going to have range error creeping into your hit probability.
And I think there's a couple things there that make that actually possible. I mean, you think about it, especially for long range stuff, with that 10 power magnification in that rangefinder is obviously making it that way more possible to see actually what you're looking at, right?
Yep.
Also, I think, something we've not really talked about much, but how fine the reticle is and the center dot on that in that rangefinder. I've found that you can actually put that dot on a tiny little steel plate or on a deer at 1,000 yards, where generally speaking, and you look at our old G7, and most other rangefinders on the market, you've got a big chunky, you're just kind of basically putting it in the center and kind of hoping that you're on there, versus an actual aim point in your...
I think the size matching the laser divergence is the most significant thing, and the little dot in the center was just kind of an afterthought.
But it's honestly,
but everybody
really
likes
awesome.
it.
Yeah.
Really I've noticed it, and I've liked it as well. I think that the far range has its uses. It's there. I can remember a few hunting situations where being able to use a far mode was save the day.
Sure.
The other thing that we added with the BR4, especially if you're an old BR2 customer, we had the ability to press and hold the button and to send out multiple pulses of energy and bring the data back and process it. And it would help us to build a target out of a really poor ranging condition. And in this new BR4, we put a lot more juice into it, and we did some new cutting edge processing. So if you're in the standard range mode, it happens so fast, you don't really have the opportunity to build that target data. And we added a long range mode, which essentially takes our old methodology and it applies it to all the new technology, the new lasers, new sensors, the new processing, and it lets us place that aim point on a target at a very far distance and hold the fire button down and build those targets out of some non-reflective, long range, poor light conditions type situations.
Sure.
And so just as a rule of thumb, what my personal experience has shown me is that out to about 1,400 yards, I feel like I can almost get any target in any situation with the standard range mode.
Yep.
Like it's really, really fast, and it really hasn't let me down very often. But once you start pushing out into that 2,000 yard range mode, I feel like that long range mode allows you to get ranges in difficult, usually terrain-based targets that are sometimes not reflective the way that you want them.
Sure.
Into that 2,200, 2,300 yard range almost all the time.
Yeah.
And then if you've got the right target, right situation, we will let you range all the way out to 4,000 yards.
Yeah.
And it's very common to collect 3,000 plus yard distances on most, terrain-based targets that you're taking ranges at. I think it's kind of sensational to chase super long distance ranging.
Right.
Like literally, I don't care if the rangefinder tells me that a target's 4,500 yards away. It's other than maybe planning a stalk, but what's your GPS for? What's your map for? Like at some point, that information has no value.
I think we've kind of moved past that point where companies will continue to sell rangefinders based on max capable range, right?
Yeah.
It's like at some point rangefinders are reaching far enough that nobody cares, right? That's not even a selling point anymore. They're all going far enough.
Yeah. The most important thing is that for your shot that you're going to take, that your range has the correct distance, not just a number, but literally the distance the target has, with a an error tolerance that is small enough that you can actually get the bullet on target.
Sure.
And I think a lot of people get kind of really excited about a long distance, and they equate that long distance with a really great distance, closer range. And I think what they don't realize is that's not how rangefinders work. Just because it ranges farther doesn't mean it ranges better close. In fact, we found that as we would basically set up like a sawhorse with an antelope hide on it, and
Sure.
we would go stick it out in the middle of a grass spot or sagebrush, and we would turn on our laser, send the data out there, and collect the data in real time and look at the signal that came back, and we would optimize our algorithm and our target threshold
Sure.
based on those specific parameters. And what we found was, as we got better and better at our, sub-mile, animal target, hide tuned algorithms, that we actually started giving up
Some max range.
Yeah, kind of the
Really?
sensational, just grab a number.
Sure.
Because what you have to do that is you're lowering your standards for, multiple pulses and the error that you get between.
Yeah.
The old Leicas, I believe it's the LRF, like the 800 and 1200 series. It had a square reticle. Those things frustrated people because they would go to try to take a range at like 1,000 or 1,100 yards, and it wouldn't give them a range.
Yeah.
Like it literally would just be nothing.
Yeah.
And what Leica had set up was an error check mechanism inside that said, hey, if we don't get,
Good enough accuracy.
Yeah, we get a couple measurements out of this, and if we don't get comparity within a certain value,
We're not going to give it out.
no range. And so if you look at what a lot of these, Chinese-based, laser algorithm developments are, is they're literally taking anything.
Yeah.
And reporting
feeding it back. Right. And I think that's what a lot of people don't understand is that there's software, there are algorithms happening in there. It's not a cut and dried one-to-one relationship. It bounces back and kicks something out. It's crunching that data and actually giving you an optimized solution back. One thing you mentioned some previous units had a vertical
Terrapin's latest flipped it sideways, just like ours.
So with that vertical beam, would they have been kind of cheating that to be able to get longer ranging capabilities?
It'll pick up something, right?
Something.
And what I found using that first one was it was really hard to tell, did I get this target or the next one or the next one or the next one? And our BR2 was so powerful and so good at determining which target you wanted that's exactly what they did. And they even brought over kind of like the near far, targeting mode as well. Yeah. So that, in my opinion, that's where everybody will go. And right now what we're seeing in the binocular space is round beams.
Yeah.
So now take everything that we just talked about with the square, the hard edge, the nearest, and the target determination. Now try to do a round beam.
Yeah.
And I've been using both for a long time. I'll have my rangefinding binoculars, and I've tried the Leicas, I've tried the Zeiss, spent a lot of time behind those. And they're really good, especially for really quick hunting, 500-600 yards, using a BDC turret, fast solutions. It's been very good.
Yeah.
Where I've struggled is you start getting into that 700, 800, 900 yards. You've got the wrong type of terrain. You can't easily apply certain targeting modes, and then you have this fuzzy round bottom edge.
Right.
So again, you can't do this target discrimination. What I've found with that in like my field experience and testing was sometimes you're plus or minus 50, 60, 70 yards.
Yeah.
And so once you start hitting that 70, 700, 80, 800, 900, I mean, you could be 10% error in your range, which is not good enough.
Yeah.
Right. For a hunting situation, it's not good enough. If you're just shooting steel, who cares?
Sure.
Right. And if you're shooting steel, it's probably a lot easier to get a real range off of vertical reflective surface.
Better setting to do that. I've always used the analogy, like you take an old mag light, right? Lay it down on the carpet out here in the hallway and shoot it down the hallway, laying on the carpet. And, so you take that beam and you can focus that beam way down. But imagine laying on that carpet, it's going to spread out 10 yards down that hallway, right?
No, that's a good visualization.
You take that low flat rectangular you're talking about, and essentially
now you can lift it up just above the carpet edge and grab the
and it's only going to spread out that far across the carpet, just a little bit instead of all the way down the hallway. So
I tried this last hunt I tried taking the ultimate product, right? So I took a BR4 rangefinder.
Yeah.
And then instead of compromising the optics with a laser in a binocular, which it compromises the optics, it's just not as good.
Yeah.
And we've torn them apart. We've tested them. I mean, I can go through the whole.
You give up.
Yep.
Yeah, a lot.
Yep. So, and then I grabbed an NL Pure 12 by 42. Holy smokes.
Man, I want a pair of those so bad.
Dude, that combination was awesome. Now, I did find in a couple fast scenarios where I wished that I would have had a rangefinder in the binos.
Yeah.
So there's still an argument that maybe you make that compromise in optics.
And having some redundancy. I mean, there's some niceties there, but
but if you're ranging over that 500-600 yard with the round beam divergence, like it's time to pull out the BR4 and use that precision measuring tool to do like fundamentals. 101 is what's the target range. Everything else comes after that.
Yeah, I've been running exactly that same dilemma, right? Running those EL ranges as kind of the first quick just backup, and then obviously you've got the BR4 if you've got the time where you need to get serious about it. But I'm really tempted to switch to the NL Pures just because the glass and the field of view is so awesome.
Borrow those ones that I've got and run them a little bit.
Yeah,
see what you think. Because they hurt. When you buy them.
No kidding.
So we want to make sure it's the right way.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, I think that's probably the number one most important thing to getting the most out of your rangefinder is understanding how to get a good range and using the features and functions on the device to do that.
Yeah.
And what I tell people all the time in our training courses is just because you got a number doesn't mean the number's right.
Yeah.
In engineering school, one of the things we set up in a class, it was called system dynamics, was he literally gave us a not a caliper, a micrometer.
Okay.
And he had a piece of metal there, and we were supposed to all measure it.
Yeah.
And you got a class of like 10 or 12 like junior, senior level engineers that go take some measurements. And we didn't all get the same number.
Yeah.
Right. And there was techniques that we had to practice and develop so that we could get a number that was more consistent for ourselves, time and time again, and then also matched better the other people.
Reliable,
so
repeatable.
The idea of this measurement device, it gives you a number, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's correct or good enough to take a shot.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So that's number one. Number two is accessing the ballistic solution.
Okay.
And this one can go really deep, but I think in the BR4 product, very specifically, just discussing base wind mode versus vector wind mode.
Sure.
And I think if we just spend some time talking about those two modes and how you access them, I think it will be sufficient for the context of this discussion. So if you have a BR4 setup, you do a profile setup in the Revic Ops ballistic app. Got this real nice profile. You can even use the ballistic calculator, check it, validate it. You can even true it if you need to. So once that's done and it's perfect and it matches what your gun is doing in the field, you send that over to the BR4 rangefinder.
Yeah.
Now with that profile selected, you can calculate your ballistics. The challenge with the ballistics is to get a really good, perfect ballistic solution that you could shoot 13, 14, 15 and further, right? You have to put in a wind vector.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Right? Because you've got a few things. You've got headwind, tailwind that starts to play a big effect. You've got spin drift that gets really big.
Yeah.
You got some features like aerodynamic jump that
with a good wind, it can make a big difference.
Can be a big thing. So you've got a couple of these parameters that you cannot add to your solution unless you tell the solver what's the direction the wind's coming from.
Right.
So that to me if you need those advanced solutions, you're shooting, well past 1,000 yards.
Sure.
If you're shooting past 1,000 yards, you need to have time to be able to put your data in, right? To put your vectors in. I've hunted a lot of animals. You throw in, 10 years of going to Africa, you throw in, all the Western hunts for the past 15 plus years, and all the opportunities that we've had, to develop equipment and to test and to learn. I've shot at a lot of animals. You look at, tons of failures, tons of learning, but most of those shots are a lot closer than 1,000 yards.
Yeah.
And the ballistics required are a little bit simpler. Like, you get out to 700-800 yards, you don't really even have spin drift being a significant player.
Yeah.
You don't really have Yovtos effect. You don't necessarily need to worry about Coriolis. And so your ballistic solution can be a lot simpler. Yeah. And what I've found in hunting situations, more often than not, having a really perfect ballistic solution that accounts for all those extra variables is not the determining factor in whether or not you have success. The determining factor is, can you get set up and shoot while there's an opportunity?
Yep.
And so we talk about why BDC turrets and why this and that. It's like those tools shave precious seconds, sometimes minutes, off of getting a solution. And so the base wind mode was designed with kind of a standard wind factor. And so you put that in the profile level. So that's like a 5 mile per hour wind, 10 mile per hour wind, or 1 mile per hour. You pick it.
Right.
And on the BR4, you go ahead and you go to the settings menu and you set that base wind mode for it's a global setting for all profiles. So you pick a 5 mile an hour wind, right? And the methods we teach in Long Range University are the entry level methods, to intermediate, basically teach you how to bracket wind 0, 5, 10 miles per hour. And so that 5 mile an hour number works pretty well for me. You either go 0, you do the 5 mile an hour hold, or you do double it for 10.
Sure.
You could also do 10 and then cut it in half.
Exactly.
So all preference based. So in base wind mode, we turn off aerodynamic jump, we turn off spin drift, we turn off headwind, tailwind, we turn off Coriolis.
Yeah.
You still do have Yovtos effect. We're still measuring compass heading. We're still getting the shot vector, so we can still do Yovtos effect. And what we basically do is we give you a right or left wind.
Mm-hmm.
So it's full value. So it's a 3 o'clock or a 9 o'clock wind at 5 mile an hour, and it gives you the wind hold for that solution. Now, the cool thing about the BR4 is it's all on one screen. You don't have to navigate anywhere. So the fast base wind mode solution method is you pick up the rangefinder, you aim at your target, you take the range. Mm-hmm. It gives you the BDC shoot to distance or MOA come up, MRAD come up, whichever one you're looking for.
Right.
And then at the same screen, without pushing any buttons, it also gives you the wind hold
right there
for that base wind.
Yeah.
So it's just right there. So say a 5 mile an hour wind at 500 yards, it's going to show you like 1.1 MOA.
Right.
Right. So you push the button, there's the solution. So it's very, very fast. So if you're setting up to shoot an animal and you've got this 5-second window before he steps out of the clearing, if you're the spotter, you're giving him that 555 yard shoot to range and hold a minute of wind.
Yeah.
Or you can say, hey, let's scale that up to 10, hold 2 minutes. And take a shot that's quick and you can be successful. I can think of dozens and dozens of scenarios where if you were, pulling out the hand calculator and capturing a wind vector and then scrolling to a range and then getting the data and then reporting it, they're gone.
So many guys I've talked to, I've got my Kestrel and I'll, do all this. I'll pull out my app on my phone and, I've hunted with guys. It's like, oh, I've got my app on my phone. I've got it. It's like, yeah, it works great at the range, and it might work if that thing sits there and stares at you all day long.
And sometimes
it doesn't always happen that way.
Some of the biggest trophies have been really fast opportunities. They don't get big because they stand around.
Nothing, yeah.
I actually do feel like that is a mark of a very experienced hunter. Mm-hmm. Is if they're using a ballistic calculator that they have to manipulate by hand. Yeah. To me, that tells me that they are they're not as experienced hunting.
Right.
Right.
They've got,
as a serious hunter, they're just shooting does out of a field
or got it down to the range,
Yeah.
right? But haven't applied it in the field as much.
Because you haven't run into that scenario where, oh crap, it wasn't good enough.
Right.
And realize that there's better solutions. So I would say ranging, number one. Number two is accessing the ballistic solution. So that is loading profiles. That stuff's all very easy to learn. But that base wind versus vector wind is a very, very subtle differentiation. And, in the development of the BR4, we realized that creating those two work streams has a really, really good benefit for the customer.
It is so powerful. I mean, the more I use it, the more I realize, we basically had the kind of I guess it wasn't really base wind.
We had the base wind.
Kind of like how we had it in the G7.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
But I mean, just always having a wind solution at your fingertips, and then the ability on the fly to dial in that vector wind is
well. So anybody that realizes how a fast solution can yield success realizes how big a deal it is to have that solution on the main screen without having to push a button. Because in the G7, you had to push the button to get to the wind menu.
Yeah.
And just that extra delay sometimes was very frustrating.
Absolutely.
So big improvement there. And then obviously the vector wind it's cool. Like it's amazing to get a solution to take a range to the target that's 1,825 yards.
Yeah.
To get a solution to put it into your optic or your scope to shoot and to see your impact hit right there. And you're doing all these things. You're holding 4 or 5 minutes of wind. You're doing this. You've got massive elevation hold. And to have that bullet show up where it's supposed to be, it is very, very exciting.
And with a little bit of use, that vector wind is really quick to use anyway. I mean, if you've got more than a second to do it, you can use
Sure. The way we set it up is just that little rosette on the main screen. Again, you're not navigating away, and you just hit the arrow buttons a couple times. Boom, there's your vector.
Got it. Yeah. Pretty nice.
It's pretty fast. Well, I think those two things, 100% the most important and most significant things about getting the most out of your rangefinder, and specifically the BR4.
Yeah. I think the one thing that stood out that we moved on there was the targeting modes. And I think one takeaway, I think a lot of guys out there probably see those targeting modes and think long range is better, right? I'm going to use long range. I think one of the major takeaways I would take away here is guys 90% of the time should be using near.
I don't think all you're going to give up is just a little speed in getting the number.
Yeah.
And I will throw this as a counterpoint is the long range mode's a little slower in reporting the range.
Yeah.
If you're a little unsteady, I could make an argument that it might be a little bit easier to deal with the jitter, the human jitter
with the long range, but you'd still be using near, right?
Yeah.
So the long range near.
But if you go back and forth between the two, I think you'll find very few scenarios where the standard near target mode
is not gonna.
That's the one.
Do it for you.
Yeah.
Anyway,
just have to be aware that it gives you a range so fast you don't get to dwell on target.
Right. It's what you're. It's almost like pulling the trigger. It's what you're on when it goes off.
Exactly.
Cool. All right. Well, thanks for jumping on with that. I think there's some good takeaways for guys kind of getting the best performance out of the rangefinders.
Welcome. Anytime.
All right.
If you like what you're hearing here, please take a second and give us a 5-star rating and a positive review on iTunes or on your favorite podcast app. We appreciate your feedback and suggestions for topics you'd like discussed or questions you want answered on the podcast. You can reach out on Facebook or Instagram or send us an email to podcast@gunworks.com. Also, be sure and check out our full offering of long-range gear at gunworks.com. Use promo code LRP for free shipping on any order.